What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video today. Another college football video. If you've clicked on this video, I assume you love college football, and I talk college football all the time. So please subscribe. Today I'm doing something new. I've not done this as a new series of videos. I'm gonna try to do every week, and it's playoff race. Playoff race after week 7. I'm gonna look at how the playoff race is going in, who's in. One-loss teams, undefeated teams, who's been eliminated, all that. And if you're new to this, I'm going to tell you the criteria. Okay? I'm going to tell you who's undefeated. I'm going to tell you who has one loss. Teams with 2 losses, I consider eliminated. Now, is it technically possible for them to get in the playoff? Absolutely. They've come very close so many times. But I just don't, it hasn't happened yet. I don't think it will ever happen. I mean, I think if a 2-loss team was going to get into the playoff, it would have been, I believe it was 2016, 2015, the year that Penn State beat Ohio State. But Penn State had 2 losses. Ohio State had that one to Penn State, and they put Ohio State over them. I just don't think a 2-loss team will ever get in. They've made that clear. So only one undefeated and 1-loss teams. I'll tell you who has been recently eliminated, who has the threat of elimination, yada, yada, yada. But let's get into it instead of me talking. Okay, let's look at undefeated teams. Georgia, still undefeated. Now, in a few weeks, they do have to play Tennessee, who is also undefeated and still in this playoff race. Ole Miss, undefeated. Ohio State, undefeated. And Michigan, undefeated. Now, obviously, Ohio State, Michigan, bitter rivals. They'll have to play at the end of the year. There literally can only be one undefeated Big Ten team. Clemson and Syracuse, the 2 last undefeated teams in the ACC. They play this week. One undefeated team from the Big 12 and TCU, and one undefeated team from the Pac-12 and UCLA. Now let's look at the teams with 1 loss. Just recently demoted from the undefeated club to the 1-loss club, my Alabama Crimson Tide. They obviously took the loss to Tennessee this past week, but that's a pretty good loss to have to an undefeated team. Alabama obviously can still get in the playoffs if they win out. There's still a chance they win out, and they can meet either Georgia or a rematch with Tennessee in the SEC Championship. That's still very possible and on the table. Now, Wake Forest, their only loss is to Clemson, but their situation is a little bit worse for them. Yes, Wake Forest only has 1 loss, and they look very good, and I think Wake Forest might run the table, but I think Clemson will run the table. And if Clemson runs the table, undefeated compared to a 1-loss Wake Forest that has lost to Clemson, Clemson will get into the ACC Championship, leaving Wake Forest out, which will really hurt Wake Forest's chances. Wake Forest needs to not only hope they win out, but hope Clemson drops 2 games. And that'll be tough to do, considering Clemson has got through the toughest part of their schedule. Some more tough games to go. Still got to play Notre Dame. Still got to play Syracuse this week. But Wake Forest not looking too great for them, even though they only have 1 loss. North Carolina, only 1 loss to Notre Dame. That 1 loss does not look pretty, though. Notre Dame doesn't look that good this year. They just don't look as good as they have. And it wasn't close either. It wasn't like they lost on a last-second field goal. No. Notre Dame won pretty comfortably. And a lot of North Carolina's games have been pretty close. North Carolina's going to need some help. But, they went out. There's still a chance. Kansas State. This is interesting. This is really interesting. Because Kansas State has beat teams like Oklahoma that you wouldn't expect them to beat. Back when Oklahoma had expectations. Now Oklahoma doesn't so much. But their 1 loss come to a Tulane team. Tulane? Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. I really don't think Kansas State can win out. But they can. I just don't think it will happen. But they'll still have to hope TCU drops a game. And probably hope they beat Oklahoma State. Okay, but let's look at Illinois, another surprising team that only has one loss so far. Their one loss coming to Indiana. Now, not a great loss to have. Indiana is not exactly a powerhouse, but what they do have going for them is that loss was very close. They beat Minnesota this past weekend. I'm a high Minnesota guy. I've been high on Minnesota for years. I think PJ Fleck's a great coach, and they beat Minnesota. I know some guys going to Illinois, actually, very loosely, but not the point. Illinois still in the race. They're going to need some things to fall their way, some chips, some dominoes to fall their way, but they are still squarely in the race. Oregon, now this is interesting. Oregon only with one loss. Now that one loss was an absolute butt whooping to Georgia, 49-3, but one loss nonetheless. They went out. They can win the Pac-12. A one-loss Pac-12 champion with a loss to the defending national champion. Absolutely, Oregon can still get in. Now, will that happen? I don't think so. I hope not. I hate Bo Nix. I hate him with every fiber of my being. He's my least favorite player to maybe ever play college football. But, it could still happen. USC, recently demoted from the undefeated club to the one-loss club. But I wouldn't hit the panic button. They can still get in. Lost to a good Utah team on the road at Utah by 1 point. They can absolutely still go undefeated and win the Pac-12. We'll run the table. They can't go undefeated, obviously, but they can go undefeated for the rest of the year and win the Pac-12. And a one-loss conference champion has a very high certainty of getting in. So USC can absolutely still make it. We'll see if they do. Oklahoma State, another team that was recently demoted from the undefeated club to the one-loss club. Oklahoma State, another team I wouldn't sound the panic alarm on yet. They lost to TCU, the only undefeated team in the Big 12. And they lost in overtime by 3. That's not a bad loss at all. They can still run the rest of the table. Now, they're going to need to hope TCU loses some games. They're going to need that. They need 1 or 2 losses from TCU. But, like I said, one-loss conference champion can absolutely still get in. Penn State, another team, the 4th team this week to get recently demoted from undefeated to 1 loss. Now, the thing about Penn State is it looks good on paper if you don't look at the score. They still have 1 loss. Their 1 loss came to Michigan, a very good team, an undefeated team, a top 5 team. But you take a look at that score, they got demolished. And yes, I know the game was closer than the box score says, but I still don't like that. I still don't like how that looks. Penn State got demolished, and they look shaky at the quarterback position. I still think Penn State's a good team, but they still got to play teams like Ohio State. And it's not looking good. They're going to have to hope for some losses, too. It just does not look good for Ohio State. It does not look good for Penn State, even though they only have that 1 loss as of now. Okay, let's see who was eliminated this week. This past week, there was 5 teams eliminated. Kansas was eliminated. They took their 2nd loss of the season to Oklahoma, 52-42. Kansas was doing really good. The surprise of the season, maybe, other than, Tennessee. Well, but one of the major surprises of the season. But that's the thing about Cinderella stories. The clock eventually hits midnight. And it hit midnight for Kansas as they take their 2nd loss and get eliminated from the college football playoff. NC State was eliminated by Syracuse. NC State had a slim chance, but, Devin Leary went down, and they take that 2nd loss to Syracuse. That eliminates them from playoff contention. Mississippi State eliminated by Kentucky, 27-17. I didn't think Miss State would make it. They still got to play Alabama. They still have to play Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. There's a lot of things that Mississippi State would have to go through. But it doesn't matter now as they've took their 2nd loss and they are eliminated. Penn State was eliminated by a playoff contender, 1 loss, Illinois, 26-14. I talked about this game a minute ago. Minnesota, I was a believer in them. I thought they would stay in the race much longer than this. Much, much longer than this. But no. In Coastal Carolina, I don't know if I mentioned this in the rules, but undefeated group of 5 teams. Undefeated group of 5 teams are allowed in the conversation. If they take one loss, they're done. Cincinnati barely got in the last year as an undefeated group of 5 team, and they lost to Alabama, which doesn't look great on them. So Coastal Carolina was the last group of 5 team, and they were eliminated by Old Dominion, 49-21. Wasn't even close to, and that ruins the group of 5 chances. 5 team eliminated. Now let's look at it by conference and by records. Okay, there are 9 undefeated teams and 9 one-loss teams. That leave 18 teams still in contention for the college football playoff. The SEC has 3 undefeated teams plus 1 loss Alabama. 4 teams total still in contention for the college football playoff. The Big Ten has 2 undefeated teams, Michigan and Ohio State, plus 1 loss Penn State and 1 loss Illinois to give them 4 total. The Big 12 has 1 undefeated team in TCU, plus a 1 loss Oklahoma State and a 1 loss Kansas State, giving them 3 total. The Pac-12, similar to the Big 12, 1 undefeated team in UCLA, plus a 1 loss USC and a 1 loss Oregon, giving them 3 teams total. The ACC, 2 undefeated teams in Clemson and Syracuse. They'll play this week, which will end that. But 4 teams in total with a 1 loss Wake Forest and a 1 loss North Carolina, giving them 4 teams in total. In the group of 5, Coastal Carolina was their last chance. They have 0 teams remaining in contention for the college football playoff. Now, I want to discuss some college football playoff theories, per se. One thing that I mentioned briefly in my Tennessee-Alabama video was the possibility, the extremely slim, below 1% chance, but the slim possibility that there could be a 4-team SEC playoff. Now, this isn't going to happen. It just isn't. It's just not. But if this happened, the country might explode. The rest of the country outside the Deep South might just explode and obliterate. Okay, let me show you how this is going to work. Let's say Alabama. Okay, they have 1 loss to Tennessee. Alabama wins the rest of their games, and they win the SEC championship. Okay, you're going to have to put a 1-loss conference championship Alabama into the college football playoff. There, you've already maintained Alabama's spot. Georgia, let's say they win the rest of their games, but lose to Alabama in the SEC championship. That's only a 1-loss Georgia team who's the defending national champions, made it to the SEC championship, beat a good Tennessee team, and only lost to a very good Alabama team. So, boom, 1-loss Georgia. Then, Tennessee. Tennessee would have beat SEC champion Alabama and only had 1 loss to playoff team Georgia. Tennessee's in the playoffs. And then, last but not least, the Ole Miss Rebels. Let's say they win the rest of their games except the Alabama game. That leaves Ole Miss with only 1 loss, and that 1 loss to SEC champion Alabama. Boom. You have 4 SEC teams perfectly in contention at the end of the year. Now, is this going to happen? Absolutely not. Now, that could happen. I realistically think that is a great possibility to have Alabama go 12-1, Georgia go 12-1, Tennessee go 11-1, and Ole Miss go 11-1. But you still have to worry about conference championships from other conferences. You would have to have every other conference have a 2-loss conference champion, and that's just not going to happen. You'd have to have Clemson drop 2 games and be the conference champion. Ohio State or Michigan drop 2 games and be the conference champion. It's just not going to happen. But it is interesting to think about, and I'd love to see the reaction on people's faces. Now, let's talk about my prediction as of now for the college football playoff. This is my prediction. If you disagree, I really don't care. Go cry about it. But at number 4, I would have Georgia right now. Or not right now. Hold up. No, this is my prediction, how I think the season's going to play out. Okay. Georgia at number 4. I think Georgia will win out. I think Georgia will beat Tennessee, but lose to Alabama in the SEC championship. I have Georgia at 4. At number 3, I have my Alabama Crimson Tide at 3. I think Alabama will win out and beat Georgia in the SEC championship. I just think it'll happen. I really do. I mean, call me a homer all you want, but that's just what I honestly think will happen. You got to put Alabama in. Then at number 2, I think Clemson will go undefeated and be the ACC championship, undefeated conference champion, number 2. And Ohio State will go undefeated and be the conference champion. That would leave Ohio State versus Georgia and Clemson versus Alabama as the playoffs. Now, you'd have to look out for some other things. I think USC and Oregon will drop some games. That will make this possible. And I think some Big 12 teams will drop some games. If they don't, Georgia might not get in, even though with that one loss. But we'll see. I think they'll drop some games, but that's my prediction as of now. What do you think is going to happen? How do you see the playoffs playing out? What do you think of my opinions? And are you surprised by who's still in contention for the college football playoff? Tell me below. I read every single comment. And thank you for watching. Peace out.